A story about second chances, silent connections, and the language of the heart. Margaret. Chun had learned long ago that success came with its own particular kind of loneliness. At 54, she sat in the back of her town car watching Chicago's December lights blur past the window, her daughter Emma beside her, small hands folded in her lap. The Christmas dinner at the Peninsula Hotel was mandatory, one of those corporate events where appearances mattered, where her role as CEO of Chun and Associates meant smiling, networking, making the rounds. She'd been to dozens of them over the years, but this one felt different. This one she'd brought Emma to. Her daughter was 8 years old. With long brown hair, she'd insisted on braiding herself that morning. She wore a green velvet dress that made her look older somehow, more serious. Emma had been deaf since birth, and Margaret had spent those 8 years building a world around her daughter where that difference didn't limit her, didn't define her, didn't make her less than whole. Still, bringing her to something like this, a room full of strangers, of noise Emma couldn't hear, of conversation she couldn't join, Margaret felt the old familiar weight of doubt. "You okay, sweetheart?" Margaret signed, the movement as natural to her now as breathing. Emma nodded, but her eyes held that cautious look Margaret knew well. The look that said she was preparing herself to be on the outside looking in. The hotel ballroom was exactly what Margaret expected: crystal chandeliers, round tables dressed in ivory and gold, a Christmas tree in the corner that must have been 20 feet tall. The air hummed with conversation and laughter, the particular energy of people performing their professional selves. Margaret felt Emma's hand tighten around hers. They made their way to their assigned table, and Margaret went through the familiar ritual of introductions, handshakes, the careful explanation that her daughter was deaf. People nodded with that particular kind of sympathy that always made Margaret's jaw tighten slightly, the kind that meant well, but somehow made Emma seem smaller. Dinner passed slowly. Margaret cut Emma's chicken into smaller pieces, made sure her water glass stayed full, tried to include her in conversations that didn't translate well to sign language. Emma ate quietly, watching the room with those thoughtful brown eyes, and Margaret's heart ached with all the things she couldn't fix. Then, during dessert, Emma tugged on her sleeve. "Mom," she signed, "I need to use the restroom." Margaret started to rise, but Emma shook her head firmly. "I can go by myself. I'm not a baby." She was 8. She was brave. She deserved that independence. "Straight down that hallway," Margaret signed, pointing. "I'll watch you go." "Come right back." Emma nodded and slipped away from the table, her green dress bright against the warm wood paneling of the hallway. Margaret watched until she disappeared around the corner, then tried to return her attention to the conversation at the table, something about fourth quarter, projections that seemed impossibly far from anything that mattered. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Margaret excused herself and headed down the hallway, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her chest tightening with a mother's particular anxiety. She found Emma standing in the lobby area near the hallway, but she wasn't alone. A man was crouched down in front of her, eye level with Emma, his hands moving in sign language. Margaret stopped, her breath catching. Emma was smiling. Not the polite, careful smile she gave strangers, but a real one, the kind that lit up her whole face. The man looked to be in his early 30s, dark hair neatly styled, wearing a well-cut black suit with an open collar. His hands moved with the fluid precision of someone who'd been signing for years, and whatever he was saying made Emma giggle, that laugh Margaret loved, the one she didn't hear often enough in rooms full of hearing people. Margaret approached slowly, not wanting to interrupt but needing to know. The man glanced up, and his smile was warm, genuine. He stood, extending his hand. "I'm sorry," he said, speaking now. "I didn't mean to startle you. I'm Daniel Morrison. Your daughter." She looked a little confused, and I noticed she was signing to herself. "You know ASL?" Margaret's voice came out softer than she intended. "My daughter is deaf," Daniel said simply. "She's 7. I learned before she was even old enough to use it seemed important." There was a story there Margaret could tell. The way he said, "my daughter," with such tenderness. The way his whole demeanor softened when he spoke of her. "I'm Margaret Chung, and this is Emma." She signed as she spoke, including her daughter in the introduction. Daniel immediately shifted to signing. "Nice to officially meet you, Emma. I was just telling her about my daughter, Lily. She's probably at home right now trying to convince her grandmother to let her stay up past bedtime. Does she go to school here in Chicago?" Margaret found herself asking, then realized she was prolonging this conversation, this moment of connection. "Lincoln Elementary. They have an excellent deaf and hard of hearing program." Daniel's hands moved as he spoke, including Emma naturally in the conversation. "It took me a while to find it, but it's been wonderful for her." Emma tugged on Margaret's sleeve. "Can I meet Lily sometime? Mom never lets me meet other deaf kids." The signing was blunt in the way only children could be, and Margaret felt her face flush slightly. "That's not true," she started to protest, but Daniel's slight smile stopped her. "It's hard finding community sometimes," he said gently, "especially when you're busy." "I get it." There was no judgment in his voice, just understanding. Margaret felt something unknot in her chest. "We should probably get back to the dinner," she said, but without much conviction. "Or," Daniel said, "there's a quieter room down this hallway where they're serving coffee and dessert. Less crowded. Might be easier to talk." He was asking, not assuming, not pushing, just offering. Margaret looked at Emma, whose eyes were bright with hope. "Okay," Margaret said. "Coffee sounds good." The smaller room was intimate, decorated with simple white lights and garland. Only a few other people had discovered it, scattered at small tables. Daniel got coffee for Margaret and hot chocolate for Emma, refusing to let Margaret pay. They sat, and the conversation unfurled like something that had been waiting to happen. Daniel had been a single father for 2 years. His wife had passed away from cancer when Lily was 5, a loss that had reshaped his entire world. The way he spoke of it was gentle but honest, the words of someone who'd walked through grief and come out the other side. "I'm so sorry," Margaret said, and meant it deeply. "Thank you," Daniel replied. "It was the hardest thing I've ever been through. But Lily, she saved me, really. She needed me to keep going, so I did. And somewhere along the way, I realized we were going to be okay." Margaret found herself telling him about Emma's father, about the divorce when Emma was 2, about building her company while raising a deaf daughter alone, about the constant balancing act of wanting to protect Emma while also giving her the tools to be independent. "You're doing a good job," Daniel said, watching Emma. who was drawing on a napkin with a pen a waiter had provided. "She's confident. That matters more than anything else. She seemed pretty happy talking to you," Margaret observed. "Because I wasn't treating her like she was broken," Daniel said simply. "I was just talking to her." And her language? The words hit Margaret harder than they should have. She'd spent 8 years making sure Emma had everything she needed: the best schools, the best therapists, the best technology. But when was the last time Emma had just had a normal conversation with someone who signed fluently, who treated sign language as just language, not as something special or difficult or limiting? "There's a family event next weekend," Daniel said carefully. "Lily's deaf community hosts a Christmas party, kids, adults, all ages. Very casual. Lily would love to meet Emma if you'd like to come." Margaret felt herself hesitating. It was one thing to have this conversation in a hotel hallway, another to actually pursue it. She barely knew this man. And yet, Emma looked up from her drawing and signed directly to Daniel. "Will there be cookies?" Daniel laughed, a warm sound that filled the small room. "So many cookies. Lily's friend, Sarah's mom, makes these amazing sugar cookies shaped like snowmen. Can we go, Mom, please?" Margaret looked at her daughter's face, hopeful, excited, already trusting this kind stranger in a way that should have worried her but somehow didn't. "Okay," she heard herself say. "We'll come." Daniel's smile was like sunrise. "Great, I'll give you my number." The party's at the community center on Clark Street. 2:00. They exchanged contact information, and Margaret noticed his hands, no ring, nails neatly trimmed. The hands of someone who took care of things, who paid attention to details. Emma insisted on showing Daniel her napkin drawing a Christmas tree with what appeared to be people underneath it, all using exaggerated hand shapes that Margaret recognized as her daughter's version of signing. "That's beautiful," Daniel signed. "Is that you and your mom?" Emma nodded, then pointed to 2 more figures she'd added. "And that's you and Lily at the party." Margaret felt her throat tighten. Daniel touched Emma's shoulder gently. "I can't wait to show Lily. She's going to love this." When they finally returned to the ballroom, the dinner was winding down. Margaret's colleagues barely noticed she'd been gone. They were deep in conversation about bonuses and vacation schedules. But everything felt different now. The room seemed less daunting, the noise less overwhelming. Emma sat beside her, still smiling, occasionally looking at the napkin drawing she'd folded carefully and put in her small purse. Margaret felt her phone buzz a text from an unknown number. "Thanks for trusting me with Emma tonight. Lily is going to be over the moon when I tell her about meeting her. See you next weekend. Daniel." She found herself smiling at her phone like a teenager. The following Saturday, Margaret dressed. Emma in jeans and her favorite sweater, more casual than she'd normally choose. But Daniel had said it was a relaxed event. She'd told herself all week that this was for Emma, that it was about giving her daughter community and connection. But she'd also changed her own outfit 3 times. The community center was warm and loud, in the way of rooms full of children. But this noise was different hands moving, faces animated, the particular energy of people communicating in the language that came most naturally to them. Daniel spotted them immediately, waving from across the room. Next to him was a girl with shoulder-length brown hair, wearing a red sweater with a reindeer on it, 7 years old and practically vibrating with excitement. Emma, Lily signed with the boundless enthusiasm of children meeting a potential new friend. My dad said you were coming. Do you want to make ornaments with me? They have glitter. Emma looked up at Margaret, seeking permission, and Margaret nodded, watching as her daughter was swept into this new world of children who signed as naturally as breathing. Daniel walked over, and Margaret noticed. He dressed casually too, jeans and a navy sweater. That made his eyes seem warmer somehow. She's been talking about this all week, Daniel said, nodding toward Lily and Emma, who were already deep in conversation at the craft table. I haven't seen her this excited since last Christmas. Emma, too, Margaret admitted. She kept asking if today was Saturday yet. They stood together, watching their daughters, and Margaret felt something she hadn't felt in years, the possibility of not being alone in this, of having someone who understood, not just intellectually, but in the deep way that came from living it. Can I get you some coffee? Daniel asked. Fair warning, it's community center coffee, so it's about as strong as cardboard tastes. Margaret laughed. Sounds perfect. They spent the afternoon in that warm room, surrounded by families who looked like theirs, who understood the particular joys and challenges of raising deaf children. Margaret found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did at social events, talking with other parents, watching Emma bloom in an environment where she wasn't different, just herself. Daniel stayed nearby, not hovering but present, occasionally catching her eye across the room with a smile that said he understood exactly how she was feeling. As the party wound down, Lily and Emma were inseparable, signing rapidly to each other, giggling over some joke that only 7- and 8-year-olds would find hilarious. They're going to be best friends, Daniel observed, standing next to Margaret as they watched the girls. I think you're right, Margaret said softly. Daniel turned to face her. So I was thinking, there's a really good pancake place near here. Lily and I go there most Sunday mornings. If you and Emma wanted to join us tomorrow just as friends, no pressure. We'd love the company. Margaret looked at him, this kind man who'd crouched down to talk to her daughter in a hotel hallway, who'd invited them into his world, who'd somehow made her feel less alone in the span of a week. We'd like that, she said. We'd like that a lot. Emma and Lily ran over, breathless and happy. Mom, Lily invited me to her house next week to watch movies. Emma signed excitedly. Can I go? Please? And Emma can come to my birthday party next month. Lily added, her hands moving just as quickly. Margaret looked at Daniel, who shrugged with a smile. What do you think? Are we doing this? And Margaret realized she was. She was opening her carefully controlled world to let these people in. She was taking a chance on connection, on community, on the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to do everything alone anymore. Yes, she signed and said simultaneously, making sure both girls could understand. We're doing this. The December air was crisp as they walked to their cars, Emma holding Lily's hand, the two of them already planning their next adventure. Daniel walked beside Margaret, their shoulders almost touching. Thank you, Margaret said quietly. For what? For seeing her. For talking to her like she matters. Daniel stopped walking, turning to face her. She does matter. And so do you. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes, not sad ones, but the kind that came from being understood, from being seen. from realizing that maybe the lonely years were coming to an end. "Pancakes tomorrow?" Daniel asked. "Pancakes tomorrow," Margaret confirmed. As she drove home with Emma, listening to her daughter sign excitedly about everything that had happened, about her new friend Lily, about the ornament she'd made, about the cookies she'd eaten, Margaret felt something shift in her chest. She'd spent so long protecting Emma, building walls to keep her out, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to let people in. Daniel had reminded her gently, kindly, without pushing, that there was another way to live. That community mattered. That connection healed. That sometimes the bravest thing you could do was simply say yes to the possibility of not being alone. Emma fell asleep on the drive home, her new ornament clutched in her hand, a smile still on her face. Margaret glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror and made a silent promise. She would be braver. She would be more open. She would let Emma have this community, these friendships, this life beyond the careful boundaries Margaret had built. And maybe, just maybe, she would let herself have it too. The next morning, over pancakes at a diner filled with Sunday morning sunlight, watching Emma and Lily sign across the table, while Daniel smiled at her over his coffee cup, Margaret Chun realized something profound. Sometimes the best gifts come wrapped in unexpected moments. Sometimes love speaks in sign language. And sometimes the family you're looking for has been waiting to find you too. Thank you so much for listening to this story today. If it touched your heart, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories about life, love, and the unexpected connections that make us whole. And please, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear about a time when a stranger's kindness changed your day. Your stories matter, and I'm here to listen. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.